In the world of composers, there are people like Mozart, who just took dictation from their mind. And then there are people like Beethoven, whose sketches show a kind of tortured soul working through every melody. And that level of kind of obsessiveness and that inability to kind of accept a given theme and to continue to pursue all the possibilities of it, that's inspiring for a composer. Because we're often trying to develop our music in ways that take a lot of time. So you can hear that in Beethoven's music when he relentlessly develops, say, the first theme of the Fifth Symphony, and really tears it apart. And that kind of micro focus on the possibilities of just a few notes, that's inspiring to composers of any era. You wouldn't think that DJing would have anything to do with classical music, but I found that in a very basic way, mixing two records has been highly influential to my symphonic approach. Whenever you have two things, say two records, you automatically have three things really, because you're traveling from one record to the second one, or in the case of Liquid Interface, my Water Symphony, you're traveling from the first movement to the second movement, and suddenly you have a whole kind of middle ground where they start to kind of blur. So that can kind of manifest itself not only on the level of architecture, movement divisions, but also on textures. If you're going from the frozen blocks of sound that are the first movement of Liquid Interface into the kind of liquid figuration of the Scherzo Liquido, there's going to be a whole level of textural development that will kind of mix together, a lot like two records. The opening of Liquid Interface has some very distinctive sounds. Glaciers calving, which means glaciers falling into the ocean as they're melting. I read about a fellow named Daniel Grossman, who's a radio journalist, who had spent a lot of time recording the glaciers calving in Antarctica. And he sent me about 6 hours of DAT recordings that I went through to just find those, as I call them, the greatest hits. You would just hear this massive cannon sound. So I tried to take those sounds and create an orchestral version of them that bleeds out of that. And that takes the form of these huge orchestral chords that float up through the entire range of the orchestra, kind of shatter in the upper registers. Scherzo Liquido is a kind of scherzo of droplets. You hear water on the small scale. Lots of playful sounds in the electronics combined with some incredibly fast licks, quicksilver kind of runs in the woodwinds in a movement that is very much about the playful side of water. I think it's important to treat the electronics as a kind of pet snake. You really need to handle them very carefully. Sometimes it's best when they go away. And in Liquid Interface, they completely tacit for the first 8 minutes of the big slow movement. When they return at the kind of height of a big storm scene in the orchestra, you have a kind of processed hurricane sound in the electronics that just completely sweeps over the entire orchestra. And I feel like that is a moment that took me as much time as any massive orchestration project to create that kind of sound design moment of a hurricane bearing an orchestra. Pastoral music is maybe one of the oldest kinds of music that emulates nature. We think of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. We, of course, have pieces like Debussy La Mer or Pines of Rome. I think it's particularly poignant when you can bring electronic sounds into the concert hall that are emulating natural sounds. It sort of flips everything on its head. So Liquid Interface, in a way, has a great deal of influence from some of the pastoral music that's kind of made up the symphonic canon, but it enters through the digital sounds of our age.